So now we have also seen one statement and understand how to answer this question. Virtue is knowledge. Virtue is knowledge. Okay. As an introduction, you will have to first tell that what is the main idea is expressed in this statement. So this statement is saying that virtue is knowledge, and you know that what is virtue? Virtue is excellence. So the statement says that knowledge is the source of excellence, or knowledge is a source of happiness. Fine. So in the introduction, what I will write? In the introduction, I will write that here knowledge is described as the source of virtue. This is a statement of Socrates. So in the introduction, I will say that here knowledge is described as the source of virtue. And then in the second paragraph, I will go for the explanation of this statement, and in the explanation I will also take a reference to the context. Reference to the context. Fine. So what is, and now how I can explain this? Reference to the context. So in this, keeping this in mind, how will I explain this? So you can write that according to the Socrates, you can write like this: in Western philosophy, it is believed that, in Western philosophy, it is advocated that the purpose of life is happiness. The purpose of life is happiness. Fine. Or you can write that in the Western philosophy, the scholars have explained the purpose of life as happiness. Okay. Now in order to have a happy life, one must have the knowledge of happy life. In order to lead the happy life, one must have the knowledge of happy life. Okay? Right. The happy life is a good life, the excellent life. The happy life is the good life or the excellent life. Next point. Thus, the happy life denotes a virtuous life. The happy life denotes the virtuous life. Okay. Now the next question is how to gain virtue, right? So you will explain little bit about virtue in the main paragraph, but you change the line, right? Virtue in the Greek philosophy. Virtue in the Greek philosophy is described as excellence. Virtue in the Greek philosophy is described as excellence, right? Just like is described as excellence, and right, excellence is seen as the source of happiness. Excellence is seen as the source of happiness, right? Socrates explains it through the example of a shoemaker. Socrates explains it through the example of a shoemaker, right? When a shoemaker makes an excellent shoe, he derives happiness. When a shoemaker makes an excellent shoe, he derives happiness. Similarly, when we make an excellent life, we derive happiness. Next point, the ability of shoemaker to make the excellent shoe. The ability of shoemaker to make the excellent shoe depends upon his expertise in the shoe craft. Depends upon his expertise in the shoe craft. Fine. Similarly, the expertise of a good life depends upon whether we have understood the art of living, whether we have gained the knowledge of art of living. Fine. So this much you can explain. Next, Socrates has even explained that in order to be happy in real sense, we should have true knowledge. In order to be happy in real sense, we should have true knowledge. Next, we will link it with Plato in the third paragraph, but we will change the line, right? Plato has used the maxim of Socrates to build his theory of ideal state. Plato has used the maxim of Socrates to build his theory of ideal state, right? According to Plato, if Athens has to become the virtuous state, according to Plato, if Athens has to become the virtuous state. It requires to be ruled by the philosophers. It requires to be ruled by the philosophers. Fine? Right? Thus, Plato has applied Socrates' philosophy to his politics. Okay? And now you will have to take the position whether you agree that knowledge is a source of virtue or not. Fine? So you can write that. Right? You can write, and I think all of you will agree that knowledge is a source of virtue. So you can say that the Socrates is regarded as the wisest man. The Socrates is regarded as the wisest man, and we cannot challenge the Socrates view that knowledge is the source of happiness. We cannot question the Socrates view that knowledge is a source of happiness, because knowledge gives us virtue, or knowledge gives us excellence, and excellence gives us virtue. So there is no question mark on this view that knowledge is the most important source of happiness. So this is how you can conclude with your comment. Now another statement I used was unexamined life is not worth living. This statement, unexamined life is not worth living. And if you are asked to comment, fine. So this statement, unexamined life is not worth living, is taken from Plato's dialogue Apology. In this dialogue, Plato has given the description of the entire process of the conviction of Socrates, the prosecution and the conviction of Socrates. So Socrates was told by the judges that if he stops philosophy, he can be given or he can be pardoned. But the Socrates said that there is no point living without my philosophy, because the purpose of life is to lead a good life, and to lead our good life we have to have knowledge. To gain knowledge we have to examine our beliefs, and if you want that I don't question my beliefs, I don't examine my beliefs, then there is no purpose that for me to stay, because then my life will not be a good life. So if I am to live not on the basis of my philosophy, my beliefs, but on the basis of your belief, then you are living, not I am living. So Socrates is an example that how important a person's philosophy, his values, his beliefs in his life, and he shows that it is better to die for your beliefs rather than to live your life according to the others. So, unexamined life, and this apology shows Socrates as the first martyr of philosophy. Fine. So, this is all we have to write in this answer. Unexamined life is not worth living. Fine. So I will give the points of this first. So this statement is from Plato's Dialogue Apology. In this, Plato has described the entire process of the prosecution and conviction of Socrates, and after which Socrates has been given the punishment, and what is the punishment? Punishment is to drink hemlock. Now, what was the charges on Socrates? The charges on Socrates was he was misleading the youth, and whatever Socrates was telling is detrimental to the interest of the state. And at that point of time, there was a tradition that even when a state used to give punishment, a state allowed great persons to escape, or there was a system of asking for the mercy. But Socrates preferred to die for his philosophy rather to sacrifice his philosophy for the sake of his life. So he says unexamined life is not worth living. Thus Socrates becomes a martyr for the philosophy. Socrates becomes the martyr for the philosophy. And what is the story of this thing? Unexamined life is not worth living. Is that in ancient Greece, there was a Delphi. There was a place called Delphi, or this was a temple, and there was a priestess of Delphi known as Oracle of Delphi, and it was assumed that she is getting the messages from the god, and the Oracle of Delphi held that Socrates is the wisest man. So when Socrates came to know that Oracle of Delphi has held that Socrates is the wisest man, Socrates doesn't agree to accept that he is a wisest man. So what Socrates used to do? So actually, during the process of prosecution, he was asked why he used to ask the questions. Fine. So the basic problem was Socrates was asking questions, and then Socrates was creating problems for the other. Socrates himself explained that I am like a gadfly, that irritating insect. So that actually puts people into action. Suppose you are sitting and the gadfly come, then you rise from your position and you want to throw that gadfly outside. Or Socrates used to explain himself as an intellectual midwife, means whose function is to help people to understand knowledge. So the accusation was why Socrates is that Socrates' actions are irritating, he is asking the questions, he is a gadfly, and Socrates is in fact misleading the youth. So it was asked by the judges, why do you ask questions? So Socrates held that I want to test whether what Oracle of Delphi has told is correct or not. And I don't believe I am the wisest of all. And so I ask questions to these people. Now, I found them, they are ignorant. He says, I am also ignorant and they are also ignorant. But the thing is, I know I am ignorant, but they don't even know that they are ignorant. Fine. So, calling the ruling class ignorant, calling the other respectable elites of the state ignorant, he has invited the crime, and they believed that Socrates is a dangerous person. So Socrates, the tragedy of Socrates also shows that what happens in this real world. So in this world, if you will speak the truth, you will be crucified. But if you are a liar, you will become the king. So that is a tragedy of this world, because this world is a world of perfection. This world is not the world of God. This world is a world of errors. Okay, so I hope you have linked all these things. Unexamined life is not worth living. Fine. So this is the last statement of Socrates in the Plato's dialogue Apology, and after which he becomes the martyr of the philosophy. Is this clear? So how will I write this answer? Write it down. Write the statement, unexamined life is not worth living, is the last statement of Socrates in his book, Socrates, in the Plato's book Apology. Right? In Apology, Plato has shown the process of the conviction statement of Socrates in the Plato's dialogue Apology, and after which he becomes the martyr of the philosophy. Is this clear? So how will I write this answer? Write it down. Write the statement, unexamined life is not worth living, is the last statement of Socrates in his book Socrates in the Plato's book Apology. Right? In Apology, Plato has shown the process of the conviction of Socrates. Socrates was convicted of the crime of misleading the youth. Socrates was convicted of the crime of misleading the youth. Socrates was given an option. Socrates was given option by the judges that he can plead mercy or he can plead his fault, and if he stops philosophy, means if he stops questioning, if he stops dialectics, he can be given mercy. Write it down further that, however, Socrates preferred to die rather than give up his philosophy. Thus, Socrates became the first martyr. Thus, Socrates became the first martyr of philosophy. Right? Socrates' message was, person's philosophy, his values are more important. Person's philosophy and his values are more important than his physical existence. Than his physical existence. So, as a physical body, you will die today or tomorrow, but your deeds, your ideas will make you immortal. See, even after thousands of years, the Socrates is among us. His ideas has made him immortal. So a knowledgeable person will understand which life is worth living. Okay, write down next paragraph. Right, according to Socrates, the purpose of life is to lead a good life. The purpose of life is to lead a good life. Right? Good life is possible. Good life is possible only when we have the knowledge of good life. Good life is possible only when we have the knowledge of good life. Right? In order to gain the knowledge of good life, in order to gain the knowledge of good life, we have to examine our beliefs by dialectics. We have to examine our beliefs by the instrument of dialectics. Right? Hence, for Socrates, that life is not worth living, which is the life of ignorance. That life is not worth living, which is the life of ignorance. So this is how you explain, and then you conclude. We can say that Socrates was the wisest of all, and we cannot deny this, that knowledge is a source of good life. we can say that Socrates is the wisest of all, and we cannot deny that knowledge is a source of good life. And it may not be possible, right? It may not be possible for every person to sacrifice. It may not be possible for every person to sacrifice his. It may not be possible for every person to sacrifice his life for the sake of his principles. Yet, what Socrates says cannot be questioned. Yet, what Socrates say cannot be questioned. Okay, so this is how you can deal with. So I can give you one example where most of the persons will sacrifice their principles for the sake of the worldly pleasure. One recent example you can take of the Shah Faisal. Fine. So Shah Faisal has resigned from IAS and he took some great aim of addressing the concerns of the people of Kashmir, but God knows what has been the reason that ultimately he had sacrificed his principles, his philosophy for the sake of the worldly pleasure, in the sense coming back to the services. So Socrates is very different. Socrates is not going to compromise. He will prefer to die for his values rather than his compromise. Okay. Now, let us. So this is all we have done and I think now you can handle these questions. So now I will come to the next idea of Plato in his book, The Idea of Justice. The idea of justice. And attached to the idea of justice is Plato's theory of ideal state. Plato's theory of ideal state. Fine. So which state is the ideal state? The question is, which state is the ideal state? Fine. If this is the question, what is the answer? The answer is the just state is the ideal state. Which state is an ideal state? The just state is an ideal state. Fine. Because only in the just state there will be peace, there will be harmony, and there will be excellence. And basically, state stands for what? State stands for justice. Because of state, you can think about justice in the life, justice in the social life, And if a state is not there, it will be a Matsnyay, big-ish fish eating the small fish. Fine. So you will have to understand first justice and power. Power means might is right. Justice means right is right. If in any state might is right, power rules, you will say a state does not exist. Fine. There is a state of nature. There is a jungle Raj. Fine. So a state exists means law and order exist, peace exists. Fine. So the function of the state is to do justice, to establish peace. And state's failure leads to anarchy, and anarchy means lawlessness or Matsya Nyay. So basically, the idea of a state, having a state means you expect justice. Otherwise, no need of justice. So justice and the state interlinkages you will have to understand, and you will have to understand the difference between the justice and power. So power is might makes right. Justice means right is right. Fine. And the state, ideal state means a just state. Fine. Which state is an ideal state? Which state is an ideal state? What you expect from the state? I am giving you two options: just state or unjust state. If you are logical, you can understand the just state is the ideal state, because the purpose of a state is to establish peace and order. And can there be peace and order without justice? Okay. So Plato wants to create the ideal state. The title of his book, the title of his ideal state is Republic. Fine. Which is also the title of his book. And in this book, he has discussed two things. First, the idea of justice, and second, the idea of an ideal state. He has discussed the constitution of ideal state. The constitution of ideal state includes the system of philosopher king, the system of communism, the system of education. Okay, so the title of his book is Republic. And what is Republic? The title of his book is Republic. What is Republic? Republic is a term Plato has used for his ideal state. And earlier also I told you that the subtitle the subtitle of his book is Concerning Justice. Concerning justice. Fine. So now, justice is the most important concept that is discussed in Plato's book Republic. So justice is the most important concept discussed in Plato's book Republic, and now we are going to discuss this particular book, this particular idea. Fine. So you can write in your copies, right? Justice is the most important concept. Justice is the most important concept or the idea. For idea, you can use the word concept. Fine. So justice is the most important concept dealt by Plato in his book Republic. Justice is the most important concept dealt by Plato in his book Republic. Okay. After this, you write, the Republic deals with the ideal state. Republic deals with the ideal state. Write down. The ideal state is ought to be the just state. The ideal state is ought to be the just state. Hence, before explaining the features of the ideal state, hence, before explaining the features of the ideal state, Plato explains the concept of justice. Plato explains the concept of justice. Fine. Right. The importance of the concept of justice. The importance of the concept of justice is evident. The importance of the concept of justice is evident because the subtitle of his book Republic, is concerning justice. Okay. Now just write that Republic is written in the dialogue form. Republic is written in the form of dialogue. Right? There are certain characters. There are certain characters in the discussion. There are certain characters in the discussion of the Republic. There are certain characters in the discussion of the Republic. Fine? Write it down. The main character is Socrates. The main character is Socrates. Right? The other characters are Cephalus. You don't need to remember these names. Fine. Cephalus, Polemarchus, Thrasymachus, and Glaucon and Glaucon. Fine. Next point. In order to tell what is justice, Socrates, it's your choice. You want to write Socrates, you want to write Plato. In order to tell what is justice, Socrates applies dialectics. In order to tell what is justice, Socrates applies dialectics. Is this point clear? Now, many of you wanted that I should explain the dialectics again. So, here I am again explaining the dialectics. So, he has used which methodology? Dialectics. So many of you wanted that I should again explain thesis, antithesis and synthesis. So here again I am using it for the purpose that you explain. Fine. So what exactly is dialectics? What is dialectics? You can write in your copies. What is dialectics? The answer is dialectics is the method to understand the truth. What is dialectics? Dialectics is to understand the truth. Fine. Truth means to understand the reality. And what is reality? God. What is God? Idea. Idea of what? Perfection. Fine. So if I want to gain the idea of the perfect state, what I will do? I will have to, or if I have to gain the idea of the perfect justice, the perfect idea of justice, or the idea of justice, or if I want to understand justice perfectly, what I will do? I will do dialectics. Fine. Now, because it is much better if you understand it, because I have to understand idea, and idea I cannot see. I have to apply my reason. I have to apply my logic to understand the idea. So I want to understand the truth. I want to understand the idea. I want to understand the perfect idea of justice. Fine, but idea I cannot see, so I have to go for logical reasoning. So what exactly is dialectics? Dialectics is the process of logical reasoning. And the purpose of dialectics is to understand the truth. Fine. Now, how do we do logical reasoning? How do we do logical reasoning or dialectics? What is to be done for this purpose? So, to do dialectics, we have to test our beliefs. For example, I may believe, this is my belief, that money is a source of good life. Fine. Is this belief is pure, ultimate, free from clutter, or there is some clutter into it? I will test it. Fine. So when I say money is a source of belief, source of good life, I will have to ask, I will have to ask the question, right? Can money give me good health? Is money a source of happiness or good health? So I will question my belief. Fine. So some of you have not understood what is thesis, antithesis. So my first position is thesis. But money is a source of good life is being contradicted. So contradiction means counter argument. Counter argument means antithesis. Counter argument or antithesis. Fine. And then I will say health. And then I will reach to this point, that the third point where my logic becomes clear. There is no contradiction in that logic. This position is called as synthesis. Fine. So the dialectics symbolically is explained through the three stages: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So thesis is my original position. Antithesis is the problem and contradiction, you can say clutters in my position, and synthesis is I am cutting the clutter and I am getting the things crystally clear. Fine. So this may not happen in one single stage. So we will have to repeat this process, and that is called the methods or steps in dialectics. So during the discussion on justice, what Plato does, Plato goes for asking the questions. Plato or Socrates. Socrates is what? A gadfly. Gadfly does what? Irritates. I may be living with this view, but somebody comes and question and I get irritated because I have to think again. But at least he is forcing me to think. So this is how he goes for discussion of what is justice, and through the dialogue, by doing the dialectics with different characters, he comes up with the idea of justice.